So let me tell you a little bit about the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. We are a centralized information hub for educators, families, and community partners. We work with these constituencies to create collaborations and build bridges on all things family engagement. We do this by providing tools and strategies such as our in person workshops and our online virtual offerings. We also work with these constituencies to empower our youth. We need to know what our youth need so that they continue to be successful both in school and out of school.
Thank you, Carrie. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are going to talk about the power of our words, how language shapes growth and connection. I'm excited to be here with you. I'd love to learn a little bit about you. So, if you would not mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, you can share where you're zooming in from. How old are your children? Or if you're coming to us as an educator, how old are your students? And then what is your role? Are you a parent? Are you an educator? Are you both? I'd love to hear a little bit about you. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat. Again, if you are on a cell phone and it's hard for you to use the chat, no worries at all. But if you are able to, love to know who's in the room with us today. And we'll take another minute. Oh, okay. Carrie, 22-month-old son, and working with us, coming to us from Span. Thanks, Carrie. I'll hold the chat open for another 30 seconds or so. Okay, we have Kayla. Welcome. Parent of a 3-year-old little boy. That's wonderful. Welcome. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on, but again, it would be wonderful to hear who's in the Zoom room with us today, and also for you to know who else is with you today. So please feel free to continue to enter your information into the chat, and I'm going to introduce myself in a moment. Oh, we have Lisa. Okay. SEL from Indiana. Welcome, Lisa. Wonderful. Oh, we have some more. Okay, I'm going to just pause for a moment before I introduce myself. We have Kathy, Childcare Director in Ocean County. Welcome. Maureen Williams from Massachusetts, Program Coordinator for a program provides wraparound services to families with developmental and high needs. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. Alexis is here with us. Okay, thank you all. So it seems like we're coming from a lot of different backgrounds. There are some of us who are parents. There are some of us who are educators and who work directly and indirectly with children. So I know that this will be a webinar that will address the needs of many people. Oh, we have Juliana. Okay, early childhood specialist, connects mothers and children under 5 with essential community resources, and a mom of a 6-month-old baby. Congratulations, Juliana. That's wonderful. Thank you for entering your info into the chat. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and then we'll get into the meat of what we're going to talk about today here. So, my name again is Erica Brenton. I am here representing an organization called SEL4NJ. I have been in education for over 20 years now. So I started off as a New York City public school teacher, and I became very invested in the world of social emotional learning, which is everything from helping kids to develop self-awareness to executive functioning skills to supportive behavior and positive language. And so I left the classroom and I really just wanted to spend my time as a social emotional learning specialist. So that's what I do now. I support parents and I support schools in their social emotional work with their students. I am calling in from Montclair, New Jersey. I have 2 children. One is in middle school and one is in elementary school. And so this work is very important to me professionally, but also has so many personal implications. So I love being here with you and I love learning alongside you. Today, we are going to do a lot of reflecting on the language we use with children and also the language that we heard in our own childhood and how that affected us. We're going to talk about why is it important to even be talking about language and why words matter. We will discuss what children, the messages we want to come across, but actually what children hear when we say certain things. We'll talk about different kinds of language we can use with children. We'll specifically hone in on praise, and then we'll close out. Again, I'm hoping that this webinar will be interactive. I am going to bring to you a lot of material, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions. And I know that there's a wealth of information in this room, so I hope we are all able to learn alongside each other. We're going to start off with a couple of quotes here. And I want you to think about what they mean to you as I read through them. So we have first, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, a quote by Frederick Douglass. And the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice by Peggy O'Mara. So for me, these quotes raise an interesting question. And that question is, where do our beliefs about language come from? So I want us to start by thinking about the messages that we heard when we were growing up. In the chat, if you would not mind indicating what phrase did you hear most growing up? So either good job, because I said so, you could do better, I'm proud of you, or something else. So just a number in the chat. And if you pick five as other, if you wouldn't mind sharing what that other is, just so super curious to hear. Okay, so we have one. Four, I'm proud of you. Oh, that's wonderful. Three, you could do better. One, oh, because I'm the mother, of course. That's a good one. You could do better. Okay, we have like a whole smattering of different ones here. So because I said so, that was one of the ones that I picked. Um, I was also going to say one of the ones I heard, and it was kind of sad when I reflected on this, but one of the things that I heard most was, "What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? What's, you know?" And I realized when I was planning this webinar how much of an impact that had on me. So thank you all so much for sharing what you heard growing up. And it's really interesting to see these responses. Um, Beyond the phrases that we heard most often, there's usually one or two comments that stay with us for years. And so I want you to take a minute to think about those. So I want you to think about a phrase or some sentence or some kind of idea that someone said to you years ago that you still remember today. And what is it and why has it stayed with you? So, oh, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for coming alongside me with the what's wrong with you, coming from your parents. Yeah. Um, so if you think about something that someone said to you years ago that you still remember today, what was that and why do you think it stayed with you? And I'd love to hear your responses in the chat. This has been such a great participatory group already, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I'm going to share with you two that stuck out to me for myself. Years ago, I was planning a presentation and I was feeling really unprepared and feeling not so, I was having imposter syndrome and just feeling like I couldn't do as good of a job as I wanted to. And my husband said to me, you're a lot smarter than you think. And that stayed with me for whatever reason for a really long time. And it's something that I hold on to very, very deeply when I am feeling insecure about something or I'm feeling like I need a little bit of a encouragement. And then the other thing that someone said to me, my father said to me when I was a little kid, was he noticed something about me that was really supportive and positive and lovely. And he said, you're so good with little kids. I think you should be a teacher. And so that is something that stayed with me for so long. And actually, it's advice that I took, and I became a teacher. So I think for me, the reason those two things have stayed with me the most is because There are things that people really noticed about me. Um, and so, there are things that maybe I didn't notice so much about myself. But anybody else have anything that they remember that someone said to you years ago that really stayed with you? And if you want to enter that into the chat, I'd love to hear that too. I'll hold the chat open for a minute. I know this one is a one where we have to think a little bit longer and harder about something that really stuck with us. Okay, thank you for not sure of your name, but anything one person can do, another person can learn. You can learn and do just as good, if not better, as the next person. That's such a wonderful, very motivating thing to hear. You're so damn efficient. Wow. Rose, give me some of your efficiency in parenting because I could definitely use that. That sounds like a really wonderful thing to hear from your parent. Anything else that anybody heard that really stuck with them? Okay. Oh, that's wonderful, Carrie. You have so much potential. And Carrie, remember last week we talked about looking at children in a strengths-based way, and you shared that your music teacher saw so much potential in you for reading music. So you heard some really positive messages when you were growing up. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on because if words can stay with us for this long, right? If we can think about things that stuck with us from our childhood, well, imagine the impact that thousands of messages children hear every week have on them. Oh, and Rose, who's better than you? Nobody. Softball coach. Oh, that's wow. Rose, you got a lot of positive encouragement as a child. So I wanted to share this story of kind of we were just talking about a lot of the positive messages we hear, but now I want to talk about some of the things that stick with us that may not feel as good. So in full disclosure, this is my younger child. He is 9, and sometimes he does have trouble listening. And my husband likes to say a lot, and he likes to speak a lot in generalities. And so he'll say to my son, you never listen. And a lot of times my son gets very, very, very upset about this because he takes on the identity that he's a bad kid and that he's a bad listener. And so, he once told us, I'm not a good kid because I never listen. And so I don't want him to have that identity of himself, but I realize how much language impacts children and really each other. And so just by shifting this phrase a little bit from you never listen to you're not listening right now and it's very challenging to talk to you is such a small shift but such an important one that will help this child at least to know that he's not bad. He does listen sometimes, but sometimes he does have trouble doing that. So I want you to think about one phrase that many of us have said or heard, and let's look at it through two different lenses. So when we talk to children, and actually I would say, well, this is mostly for children, that children can really take things in two different ways. We can have the message of something's wrong with you, and I think we had shared that in the chat a little bit that when I was growing up, I heard a lot of like, what's wrong with you? Or we can hear that you're capable, right? You're capable of learning and growing. And children really develop beliefs about themselves through these repeated messages. So, words communicate what we value, what we expect from them, whether someone feels capable, whether someone feels connected. Oh, we have Kathy in the chat. Message B is much better. I agree, Kathy. And I think sometimes we can unintentionally we want to convey those messages, and sometimes it's unintentional that we're sharing that something is wrong with you. And so just kind of like that example with that my husband shared with my son, you never listen. He really took that as something is wrong with you. But if we were to reframe that into message B and say, we know you can do better. You're not listening right now. It's really challenging to talk to you. What could you do to help yourself to listen more? Like how much more of an impact that could have on a child when you're really able to notice, okay, am I sharing that something's wrong with this child, or am I really believing in their capability? So let's put this idea into practice. Um, I want you to think about, instead of asking or thinking about what does an adult mean in these phrases, let's ask a different question. What message do you think the child is receiving here? So in number one, we have, you're so smart. What That's something that we say a lot to kids, right? My kids come home with good grades and I'm like, you're so smart. That's wonderful. Um, what message do you think a child is receiving when we say something like, you're so smart? Curious, and any thoughts in the chat, and I can share my thoughts in a moment. What a child might receive from listening to that. Maybe Rose says a little patronizing. Um, the first one doesn't give context as to what they did that was so smart. That's true. And I agree with this. It's not very specific, right? It could say, you could say, oh, here, Rebecca has something. They're capable. It could feel like they're pressuring or could make them feel that they're superior. Absolutely. And I think our intention here, right, by saying you're so smart is actually really positive. We want to share that we're so proud of this person and we notice something about them, but saying you're so smart is sharing that, well, there's some natural intelligence that you have that maybe, other people don't have. So maybe that's superiority. And I'm not saying we shouldn't say that. We'll get into praise in a little bit. But just curious to think about what messages kids hear. Let's go to the second one. Why can't you just pay attention? That's something that I think we hear a lot in the classroom, right? Like, why can't you sit still? Why can't you pay attention? Um, what do you think that a child may think when we say, why can't you just pay attention? What do you think they think about themselves? Yeah, maybe they make them feel like, actually, I think it's interesting if I said that to you and you pretend that you're a child, right? And I say, why can't you just pay attention? How does it make you feel? That they could feel worthless, something's wrong with me, being difficult, maybe confused about why and feeling sad. Totally. And I think, again, our intention as adults, right, is we want kids to pay attention. And if you're an educator in a room with a lot of other kids and you just need kids to pay attention, I think this could be like a go-to line, right? Is just, why, like, what's wrong? Why can't you just pay attention? But really, what kind of impact does that have on the child, right? Does it have this impact of something is wrong with you, or does it have the impact of you're capable of learning and growing? So maybe a way we might want to reframe that is, I notice that you're really not paying attention right now. What can you do to get yourself back into a good spot? Um, okay, we have another entry into the chat. A child might become more careful or too careful about that, what they do or say. Right. So it's almost as if they're like walking on eggshells, right? Like they don't know what to do or say. Um, let's go to one more on this list. I'm curious what you all think about number 4, good job. So I say that all the time to my kids. I say that a lot of times to other people's kids too. Great job, good job. Um, what could that mean to a child when an adult says good job? And it could simply just, there's no like hidden meaning under this. Like it could simply be that, they're actually doing a good job. Okay, so Alexis says it feels temporary, right? Like what they're doing in that moment is fine, but maybe it's not lasting. That's a great point, Alexis. Anything else that you think a child might hear or believe when you say good job? Okay. So I'm gonna also just share, I think sometimes it could also feel a little confusing as to like, well, good job. Right, good job could make them feel happy. You're so right, Kathy. Um, and it could also mean like, okay, well, what did I do to do a good job? Right? Like this adult clearly sees something, right? Exactly, Rachel. It's not specific, right? To what did they do a good job? Like, so if someone said good job to me, I'd say, okay, well, that actually makes me feel a little good, but I'm a little confused as to why you think that. Yeah, I think you guys are all on right on point here. It could be encouraging to keep trying, but it really needs to know how the job was a good job. So I think it's again this message of we have really good intentions with our kids. We are saying good job to them. We want them to feel good. But sometimes the way we tweak our language could really have amazing impact. Um, I'm just going to go through the next couple and then you don't, if you want to enter your thoughts into the chat, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. But saying something along the lines of you never listen, similar to what my son felt, maybe they actually feel bad, like that they're a bad person. I never listen. And so that's really bad. Number five, stop crying. Can make a child feel possibly, maybe in that moment, especially if you're a parent and you're in a high stress situation, or if you're working with children and there's a lot of behavior stuff going on, that crying is not allowed. It's not okay to feel sad. In the moment, we just want to rid ourselves of that behavior, but maybe trying an approach that is a little bit more like, I notice you're crying. Is there anything I can do to help, or what can make you feel better? And then, of course, we have this what's wrong with you, which I will say personally felt like there was something wrong with me as a child, and I never knew what it was, but it could be a very hurtful statement. And I imagine that's not what an adult means in that moment. They just want to know what's happening and how to fix it. So, here's what's really challenging is that most adults have really good intentions, and the gap isn't between caring and not caring, right? We're all here because we care. It's between what we intend to communicate and what kids hear. So, here's just a couple of other examples. So, if I want you to improve. Adult might mean I want you to improve, but a child might hear, well, I don't feel good enough, or an adult might want to help. I want to help you. I do this all the time. I rush in to help. I don't know if you all do this um, as parents and people who work with children, but when we see our kids struggle, we're very quick to go and help. But sometimes when we do that, we can make a child feel like, okay, well, I can't do it on my own, right? Something's wrong with me. If we express a frustration, and I would say, I think telling a child I'm frustrated is an absolutely fine thing to say. But maybe following it up with why I'm frustrated, right? I'm frustrated because I'm trying to share with you something and you're not listening, or I'm frustrated because the house is messy and I asked you to clean it up. Just saying I'm frustrated or I'm mad or I'm angry, maybe the child will feel, they're letting us down or they're a disappointment. Um, and then maybe just this saying of I want you to succeed, right? Which for us has really good intentions, right? We want our children to succeed. We want our children to succeed in the classroom. We want them to succeed in life. Um, but maybe they hear that mistakes are not okay. Um, and so the next question is if words shape how children see themselves, right? Every day, the words we use every day. Well, what kind of messages are we sending every day? So most of us don't wake up in the morning intending to like discourage or shame or control children. And in fact, most of the language that we use comes from a good place. Um, but when we're stressed or when we're frustrated or when we're in a hurry, our language can shift from teaching language to controlling language. And, you know, controlling language, especially if you're somebody who works with a lot of children, can definitely be effective for short-term compliance, right? Like, stop that. Don't do what you're doing. And in that moment, the child will stop doing what they're doing. But it's not likely that children will build the skills that we want them to build to develop these really strong life skills like responsibility and self-regulation and problem solving and independence. And so something you can ask yourself is, am I trying to control this behavior in the moment? And I would just say, yeah, if yes, then give yourself permission to do that because we have to keep kids safe. That's very important. But if we can shift from that to, am I trying to teach a skill that will help a child when I'm not around? That's a really, really important question. And so some examples of controlling language could sound something like, stop that, or because I said so, or hurry up, or don't do that. But we can think about, okay, if we're actually wanting to teach, so here's some examples of language we could use. What's the expectation here? Let me explain why. What's getting in the way? And here's what to do instead. So, thinking about yourself in the moments of, in maybe more stressful moments with children, what thinking about what controlling language do you use? And then are there opportunities to shift into teaching language? So if you notice, I would say as a teacher, right? For me, one of the hardest times of the day is lining up for lunch. And so kids would just be like hitting each other. I taught elementary school and the behaviors could be very silly or, just being very, very loud. And in the moment, all I wanted to do was just stop the behavior. So I would sometimes in not my greatest moments, I would be like, stop, please. Um, when I was able to really think about what I wanted from my students in a way that they would produce the result, the expectation day after day, I shifted to teaching language. And so I would bring them back to the rug or wherever we were sitting. And I would say, like, what's our expectation for lining up? Right? We're not doing what we talked about doing. We're not doing what we agreed upon in the beginning of the year. So what's our expectation? And having kids really think through that and then saying, okay, so if that's the expectation, then let's go and line up the right way. If you noticed, you have siblings and they're fighting and all you want to do is get them to stop, right? We could shout at them like, just, stop doing that. But what if we want to produce a more long-term result, right? So we could say things along the lines of, I notice we're not treating each other kindly here. What is a way that we could treat each other more kindly? Or that's not how we treat each other in our family. Okay. So if the goal is to teach rather than to control, well, then the question is, well, what does that sound like? And I think one of the biggest shifts, let me just move my cursor here. I can't find it. Here we go. Okay. And one of the biggest shifts is moving from telling children what to do and what to think to helping them think for themselves. So we want kids to make good choices, not when we're just standing next to them, but we want them to make good choices even when we're not around. And so that requires really more than that compliance, right? We don't want them to just do things for us. We want them to do things because they know it's the right thing to do. And that really requires responsibility and reflection and problem solving skills. And so one of the simplest ways we can do that to build those skills is through the questions we ask. So we could think about using something called coaching language. Um, so instead of asking, why did you do that? So let's just say, you have an older, I'm just going to come from my own parenting place here. Like you have a child, one child hits another child. Um, in that moment, we could say like, why did you do that? Or what's wrong with you? Or like, can't you control yourself? So how can we give them a script or give them a narrative that they can use even when we're not around? So we can ask them questions like, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? How did it affect others? What could you do differently next time? And how can I help? Um, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, and I'm very curious to hear from you all. Is there anything that you do or you ask children or you say to children to either use teaching language or to support their levels of responsibility and problem solving? So I gave you a lot of suggestions and ideas, but is there anything that you're doing that's working with kids? Just curious to hear from the room. Um, how do you help kids think for themselves, or how do you help them take on responsibility? How do you help teach them? And you can put your thoughts into the chat box. That would be great. All right, I'll hold the chat open for another minute. Totally fine if you're can't think of one off the top of your head. I just want to make sure that I am. Ah, that's a great, wonderful one that I had not thought of. What are we feeling in our body that made you react that way? So, really helping them to understand that there's like physical sensations that we have that cause our behavior. That's such a wonderful question. Thank you for sharing that. Really embodying and teaching them, right? That's a teaching question. So we can feel things in our body that make us have different reactions. So that's a great one. Anybody else have any other questions you ask kids or things you do to help them to thinking for themselves? What were you trying to do, right? Like that's a great one. So thinking about, okay, your behavior produced this outcome, but what were you trying to do? What were your intentions? Um, when asking for something from them, I ask them to tell me what they understood. That's wonderful. So you ask them to almost share back. I think that that's what I'm hearing. Um, so that they make sure that they know that whatever you shared with them is internalized. That's such a great one too. Thank you all. So let's apply this. And again, if you have other ones, we would love to hear. So please feel free to keep entering your thoughts into the chat. So let's look at this from a real life situation. So let's say your child or like you're a teacher. Let's put yourselves in the shoes of a teacher or a parent, and you're a teacher and a child forgets their homework for the third time, or you're a parent and your child forgets to do their homework for the third day in a row. What would you normally, and you can just think about this, you don't have to put your ideas into the chat. And if you want to, you can. What would you normally say? And then, given all that we've just talked about, how might you rephrase it? So, I'll just give an example. If I was feeling frustrated with a child who forgot their homework for a third time in a row, I might say something along the lines of, well, like, what's the problem? Or like, why did this happen again? Or, um, you know, just kind of really like expressing my frustration, I guess. I don't know if I said, why did this happen again, if I would really want to know the answer. But if we were thinking about rephrasing it into a way of problem solving and responsibility, we might say something along the lines of, this is the third time you've forgotten your homework. In fact, let's go back to the screen before. Um, what happened? What were you thinking? Like, how is this going to impact your grades? What could you do differently next time? And is there anything I can do to help? In fact, I love these 5 questions as almost like a script, right? This is like a problem solving script. So if they're faced with the problem of not doing their homework again, they could really think through this for themselves. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit now, and we're going to talk about praise. And we're going to shift now from how language shapes behavior during difficult moments, to really thinking about those positive moments that we talked about in the beginning of the webinar. And when we talked about the phrases good job and you're so smart, those are really coming out of encouraging places. They're coming out of positive places. But sometimes the way we praise children can make a very big difference. And we're going to watch a video about a researcher. Her name is Carol Dweck. And she reminds us that praise isn't good or bad. But the question she really raises is, what is our praising teaching children to value? So let's watch this quick video, and curious to hear your thoughts.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really, really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now, the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really, really hard at this. Now, this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
Child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset. They play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now, this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with. So teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize Okay, praise is a good thing, and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put forth. I think this is a pretty easy fix that will help us.
Okay. I'm just curious if there were any reactions to that video. I thought it was very profound, just how praise can affect kids in such different ways, different types of praise. Anybody have any other reactions to Carol Dweck's research around praise? Hold the chat open. Rebecca, it's shocking to me, isn't it? Isn't that just such a shock? Yeah, I'm curious as to why, like what about it is shocking. But same, I find it to be wild that just like these small little words that we use can have such an impact. Yeah, I agree. Anybody else have any reactions? So, I'm curious. I'm going to just skip a slide for a second. What type of praise do you, oh, sorry, Rachel. Yeah, I want to make sure I was going to say that. It's surprising how much your phrasing can impact them. Yes, it's wild. Oh, I thought praising intelligence would make the student want to prove it and work harder. Interesting. Yes, it would seem like that's the naturally intuitive thing, right? But yeah, it's very surprising and very interesting. So just curious, what kind of praise do you tend to use most often? I would say for me, good job is my like default good job, or I do tell my kids, you're so smart. Rachel shares good job followed by whatever they did well. I think that's actually, Rachel, really like helpful to have that follow up though, right? So instead of just saying good job, like, well, what specifically was the thing they did so well so that they could know, okay, I could replicate that the next time, right? So I'm glad you shared that. Anybody else have any like praise statements they use? And we're not judging you at all because we all do it. Look at what you did. You should be so proud. Yep. Carrie, I feel like just hearing that sounds so sweet. And maybe you could also follow it up with, you built that tower and yesterday you only had 5 and today you have 10 and good for you. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's see here. Praise I would actually use is starting with asking them to recall what they did and following up with a good job. Okay, so that's being specific, Alexis. So I think that kind of praise is effective. Oh, my husband says I'm so proud of you a lot. Rachel, does he say that to you or does he say that to your kids? I feel like I would like someone to say that to me. Okay. Rebecca, good job. I love X, Y, and Z. Can you explain it to me? So that's fantastic. So really getting them to understand the value of what they bring sounds like a really great way to get them to really understand their effort. My child is very creative, so I try to comment and things I would know different with a positive praise. It's hard to, yeah, it's interesting praising creativity. And, Joanne, I wonder what you would specifically say to your child in terms of their creativity. Like, what specific words do you use? And I ask that actually also because I have a very creative child too, and I'm curious what you would say. Rachel, to my 10-month-old son, but also me. That sounds really nice. Okay. I'm just gonna, so, just two examples and then we're gonna move on from praise is instead of saying you're so smart, right? Like we want them to know that the strategies they used, you tried different strategies until you figured it out, or you're such a natural leader, well, what about them did you notice that they were being, how were they being such a natural leader? I noticed that you helped everyone participate. So really, and I think a lot of you are already saying these things that you already do. I feel like this group feels advanced, like it's ahead of the curve a little bit on praise. But really, really pointing out like the very specific things that you notice about kids can really help them to understand their own abilities. All right, so we have talked about a lot of things so far. We're kind of getting to the end of our webinar here, and we're going to just do one or two more things. You know, we've explored how words shape identity, how language can control or teach. We talked about questions we could use for building responsibility and problem solving. We've talked about feedback and how that could be more positive, powerful than praise or criticism. And so knowing these things and applying them in the moment can be two very different things. So, you know, a lot of times we don't have the time to stop and think through like which communication theory we want to use when our child is melting down or refusing to do their homework or arguing with a sibling. So what we need are really some practical phrases that we could use in real life. And the good news is that, as we've talked about, these small shifts in language can have a big impact. We don't need to learn a whole new vocabulary. And often just changing like a couple of words can help really transform a conversation from a power struggle to a new learning opportunity. So just some examples here. Is like, you know, instead of calm down, maybe we could say something like, I'm here, let's figure this out together. I know a lot of us talked about the fact that we say good job, but we follow it up with something. So tell me how you figured that out. Be careful. I say that a lot. You know, what's your plan? You're okay, right? I think we say that to kids a lot, even if they look hurt or worried or sad. But maybe showing some empathy in there that looks upsetting. If we have kids who are fighting, stop arguing. But you know, that's that in that moment compliance. Maybe we want to shift to help me understand what's happening. You're fine. Again, that's kind of similar to you're okay. But acknowledging this, I can see this is really hard right now, and how can I help, or what do you need? And then you need to, what do you think needs to happen next? So getting them to really think for themselves. So thinking about for yourself, you know, what could you do? And I'm just curious what you have taken from this webinar to really shift your language. So noticing one phrase that you use automatically. I will say, you know, something that I really took from this webinar when I was designing it was that I need to be a little bit more careful with how I talk to my two sons when they're in a squabble. So instead of saying something along the lines of like stop or that's it, or you know, really pausing before you say it and then replacing it with something more intentional. So, you know, how could you be kinder to your brother, or what's happening right now? You know, how could I be of help? Something like that. So thinking for yourself, what is one thing that you usually say, and how might you want to shift that? Here's just some parting words, because I think one of the most important things in working with kids as a parent or as an educator is that we know that like there's never any level of perfection in this work, right? We don't always say this like the right thing. We don't always behave the right way. Like there's no right, I think, in this work. So I think the important message I want to pass along is that you won't always choose the perfect words. I don't think we ever could do that. You know, and children don't need perfect adults. You know, they need adults who are willing to reflect and really think about how they could address things differently or better. But there's never a perfect version of this. So just curious from you, given all that we've talked about today, is there anything that you're thinking of doing a little bit differently as you move out of this webinar? Something you're thinking of shifting? And I'm going to give you a great tip for what you could do to help yourself shift that language, because it's something that really helps me. So anything you're thinking after this webinar that you're going to do differently, or something you're going to change, or something you're going to try, or something you're going to keep doing that you feel really good about. I'd love to know anything that you took from the webinar. Oh, sorry, and you can put those thoughts into the chat. That would be fantastic. And thanks, Joanne, for replying. Okay, depending if it's an art or a task. Okay. We'll hold the chat open for another minute. Okay. All right, we have a couple of entries into this. So I'm going to think about what I'm saying. Try to stop that for something more constructive. Yep, Rebecca, me too. I hope, and I just wanted to share that this presentation will be shared with you. So you'll have it in your inboxes. And if you want to refer to any of the language swaps that we talked about or any of the suggestions, they will be made available to you. And to praise effort more. Yeah, that is something I always strive to do, to some different levels of success. Okay, we have be more intentional and swapping words to be more constructive and to better help them. Fantastic. So really that intentionality sounds like something you're going to focus on. That's wonderful. Keep trying to praise effort over innate gifts. Yep, that's fantastic learning from today. Thanks, Carrie. As you are all continuing to enter your ideas into the chat, one thing I just wanted to share with you if you wanted to try it. This helped me very much as an educator in the classroom. But you can think about it as a parent as well. Oh, thanks so much, Rose. Thank you so much for coming. Rose, I'm just going to share with you, you'll get a feedback form. If you want to fill out how you felt about today's webinar, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but thank you so much for coming. So one of the things you could do is first of all, you can just write whatever language you want on a piece of paper and like hang it up on your fridge or hang it up on your wall in your classroom. So as a teacher, if there was language swaps that I was working on, I literally would hang up the thing I wanted to say in the classroom, and so it would always be available to me. I could always look at it. And if kids asked about it, I'd say, I'm practicing saying new things in the classroom. I'm going to try to say this more often, right? We can be very honest about it. Another thing that I would do is I would take some rubber bands and I would put them on my left wrist. And every time I used a language swap, I would move them to my right wrist. And so by the end of the day, if let's say I had 5 rubber bands, I would want all my rubber bands to move from my left wrist to my right wrist. Another thing you could do is you could put some pennies in your pocket. And every time let's say one of your goals is to use more or highlight more effort in your praise, to shift the pennies from one pocket to the other pocket. So just some tips and tricks, but having some kind of accountability measure can be super, super helpful. So thank you all so much. And again, this will be emailed to you. Here are some resources for you that you can check out that have all to do with language support. So there are some books, some podcasts, some organizations you could check out. And I hope that you had a wonderful afternoon with us. Thank you for spending your lunch hour here with me. And if anybody has any questions, I can hang on for another few minutes. But if not, have a wonderful afternoon. And please stay tuned for more upcoming webinars from the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. Have a wonderful afternoon.